Well, hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner here on YouTube. I'm Angela, and it's lovely to have you join me again. If you're new here, I hope you enjoy what you see. If you're a returning visitor, it's lovely to see you again. And if you've subscribed to my channel, which is completely free, by the way, there's no cost involved. All it means is that you can get notifications when I upload new videos, or you can take part in the community tab. That's it, basically. And it also helps with the YouTube algorithm, as do comments and all sorts of other things. But really, I'm here. I think this is my purpose on YouTube, is to encourage you and to share tips and tricks and broken down step-by-step ways of drawing things and putting things together in my kind of intuitive, not really thinking about things, doodly, kind of Zentangle-y, kind of entangled, kind of intricate pen drawing way. Sometimes with a bit of colour, sometimes with some shadow, depending on how I feel. Now, yesterday, I added a letter I to this particular alphabet, and I've decided I'm going to leave H as it is. There are no outside lines on that H. The illusion of line is created simply by the motifs being cut off, and your eye goes, oh, there must be a line there, or your brain does. Your brain likes to do things like that. So this is the eye I did. It's on slightly different paper. It's on different paper, which is why it's a different colour. And it's bigger, and I used a fatter nib, thicker nib, so that I haven't got as much detail in this as the others. Yeah, I couldn't pack as much in, otherwise it'd just be black. But before I do that, I just wanted to show you a couple of things. This is one of the drawings I showed yesterday. I've now finished it, and I'm now happy with how this looks. Yeah, I'm happy with this. I'm shocked myself. And I think I scanned it in yesterday. I'm almost positive I scanned it in, so I'll check before I do anything with it, possibly. But all pen drawing, all patterns and motifs, some of which you'll recognise from my videos if you've been watching them, some of which, like this swerve here and this one possibly isn't new, although I've done things that are similar. I think the difference here are the lines in it. All to do with the word quintessence and what it means, because it's one of my favourite words. I like quintessence. I like the way it sounds. I like words. And then this is one that I did this morning. Well, I started last night and I carried on this morning. And I sometimes get to this point where I think, what the hell was I thinking? And that was the case with this bit in the middle, because I laid it out so it was all a bit wobbly, and then I thought, oh, I'll outline it. And I got this bit here, and I tell you what, I was so with myself. But I thought, what a perfect quote. So the quote's by Dieter F. Uchtdorf, and it's what you create doesn't have to be perfect. And that's something I sort of like, this message that I try to put across. We're not aiming for perfection. Well, not on my channel anyway. I'm aiming for enjoyment and something that I feel is good enough. And there will be imperfections, because we're human. If you want something that's drawn perfectly, or typography that's perfect, that's what computers are for. That's why we have desktop publishing and word processing and, you know, art packages, you know, like Illustrator, where you can draw things perfectly with great precision. I'm hand drawing. It's not going to be perfect. And I'm learning to embrace that variation, or those variations that crop up, because it's human, and it's also part and parcel of how my hand-eye coordination, my muscle memory, all of these things work. So this has the stamp of being me on it. Even this weird bit of lettering in the middle is typically Angela, because I often go, what was I thinking? But I persevered. And that's one word I haven't got here, is perseverance, and perhaps I'll do that on another one, because I thought, I'm not happy with this, but let's just keep going and see what happens. And this happens with nearly every piece of art that I do. in fact, if not every piece, I get to a point and I think, oh, what on earth am I doing here? This really is not going to work out. It's absolutely awful. And I just push forward and I get to the end. And when I sit back and look at the overall thing, I think, actually, I quite like this. It's okay. And sometimes it's actually, that's good enough, which for me means I'm actually well pleased with it. British, see, understated, you know, typical introvert. Yeah, it's good enough. It'll do. And I think learning to accept that from yourself at the stage of your development, your skills, your confidence, saying, yeah, that's good enough. That's good enough for where I am now. And that good enough can vary from day to day. And if I compare that with this one, I used a much thicker pen in much of this. I used an 08 for a lot of it, and I even went to a 1.0 for some of the sort of 10mm instead of an 8mm nib for some of the thicker lines on this one. So it's much bolder, much more solid. This one's got a more airy-fairy kind of feel, only slightly more airy-fairy, but it's there. It's not quite as dense in ink. There are places where it is. And so I'm trying to work out which I prefer. And in some ways, I really like this thick, dark blackness. I like the way things are quite bold. And I got some Doodle World critters in this one because, well, just see what happens. And up what pops. Oh, up they pop. You've got to have some fun and whimsy. I also wasn't happy with my lettering here, so I thought, well, it looked quite empty when I'd finished it, you know, left it open. So I thought, let's put some patterns in. I put some patterns in and I thought, now I've lost that shape. It didn't feel, I felt like I'd lost some of the shape of the letter. So I thought, right, thick line. And that's where the thick line started, actually, was there. I messed up the ends here a bit because I decided I wanted to join these sections up and things. I wanted to fill these in, so I've got a kind of, you know, flows to the end of the shape. In hindsight, if I only I'd waited. But there we are, I've got a fish in there, I suppose. But and this one's on the side. That says this is me. The imperfect variations are what makes it uniquely yours. And perfectly imperfect. Be perfectly imperfect. I know that Tim Holtz uses that a lot. I know lots of other people do. And to be human is to be imperfect. And I think I like my art that says somebody can look at it and go, oh, Angela Porter did that. Even though it might be stuck in amongst a pile of other stuff that's very similar, somebody can look and go, that's Angela Porter's. And you think, yeah, that's my style. It's hard for me to accept it, but, you know, I'm getting there. So I thought I'd share that with you. And this, you know, surprising discoveries are made. For those who've watched lots of my videos, how many times have I been wandering along, you know, doing variations of a motif with you, and suddenly my pen goes in the wrong direction, or I go, oh, that's not what I wanted to do, or there's what I think is a mistake, and it's led to new motifs or new variations of patterns. So you say it's a mistake, but it's an opportunity to learn and discover new things, and to, you know, to make sure that you just enjoy the process. And it's all about exploring who you are as an artist. And each and every human is an artist. It's just finding out how we want to express that and what works best for us. So I'll pop those to one side for a moment because I am going to go back to the letter I, because I had a request from someone who left me a really, really lovely, yeah, I did scan that one in, just checking on that, who left me a really, really lovely comment on YouTube yesterday. I'm just going to look it up because I think I remember the name, but I'm not entirely sure. And as always, I am so organised, not that I'm opening YouTube so here. Oh, Keith Chen, and he asked if I could include shading because he'd love to see how I'd shade this. Well, Keith, if you're watching, here we go. I'm going to try some shading, which is going to be interesting. Remember to put some light on the matter. And to do shading, I'm going to use alcohol markers, because if I'm going to colour this, I'm going to use alcohol markers, and the shading underneath will actually show through, as we've seen before. So I'm going to use, rather than a distinct light, well, I will use a light source. And for me, whenever I do things like this, my light source is always to the top right. It's just how I think of light. It's always over there, unless I'm forced to think of it in a different direction, but it's usually to the top right with me. So anything that is bottom and left of a shape or a section is going to be in shadow. But I'm also going to look at layers, so that anything that is below another object or part of this is going to be in shadow. So if we look here, this is above this circular shape here. So where these overlap, there'll be shadows there. Same here, but this one's above that one, so there'll be shadow. So it's the two ways that shadows are added, and I do it without thinking mostly. So this is going to be a challenge for me to try to put into words what I do, because I've said before, I have to be forced to air my thoughts in words, and I'm not used to putting words to my thoughts because my thoughts aren't in words. So, or they're so fast I don't catch them. I'm not entirely sure which. So I'm going to start with, I've got my two lightest cool greys here. So these are Ohuhu markers, which are perfectly fine and work just fine and well. And I can wreck them and not worry about them with my heavy-handedness if that's what happens. So I've got a cool grey number 20, so it's a Roman numeral 2, and a CG2, which is a cool grey 2. So I'm going to start with the lighter one, and it doesn't matter where I start on here. I'm just going to pick somewhere where I can put some shadow in. Now this is going to be interesting because I don't think I've used alcohol markers with this Documentus ink. And I've just realised that, or just thought about this and thought, oh, is it going to pick that ink up? So I'm just using the lighter colour grey to help blend that darker one out. I am going to put some shadows underneath these as well. Brush markers are really nice to use for doing this because you can get them to a point and you can get very fine lines with them. Not so easy to do with a bullet tip. So I've got some there. Now for these roots, I am going to pop some shadow to the left of these lines. Wherever they go, even if they spill out, and underneath. So it's working out where's underneath and where's to the left. And it's not always that easy to work that one out. There we go. And then I'm just going to run a bit of the lighter colour along the edge where I can, just to blend it out and soften that edge of that darker grey here, just to make it feel a bit more natural. For this one, I'm going to do a very simple shadow where I'm putting some darker shadow right beneath this and this one here, so that it feels that I've got this arching upwards. I'm going to keep the central part completely white. I'm going to put some shadow just at the bottom there. Hopefully that you can see this. So I might zoom in because I can't see what it is on the screen. Mind you, I got my, oh, there we go. It's very subtle on camera, but actually for me it's quite distinct. But this will fade, and as it fades I may choose to go back with that number 4 because I've got a cool grey number 4 here, which is darker. Now, you need to look at how the numbers vary with alcohol markers. You don't have to use alcohol markers. You could use a graphite pencil and a blending stump to do this. You could use coloured pencils. You could use things like Tombow markers, watercolour paints, whatever you have to hand that you're comfortable with. You don't have to dash out and get same materials I'm using. Again, if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that my preference for things to colour with varies a lot with time. So we've got those all done. So here I'm looking at putting shadow underneath these to lift them up, and in the areas where there would be shadow, again I'm using my darker shadow ink pen here. I've just realised I haven't put any lines in that section. It's okay. I'll come back and do that. So I'm just going to use the lighter grey to fill the rest of these sections. I'm not going to leave any highlight on these because I want that to be the background, so it's okay if it's that little bit darker. And again, if I need to, I'll come back with a darker grey if I need to intensify the colours. For these, I'm putting shadow at the end of each of these arches, like so, and then just come back to the edge, overlapping just a little bit and seeing if I can get this to fade out. With these, I am going to put some shadow here, and I'm going to pop some along the lower edge. Not so easy for me to do, especially as, even though I've been drawing for quite a while this morning, I'm sat in a different place and working at a different angle. I'm just going to pop some shadows at the bottom of these little seeds in here. Some there. Add a bit of that. So this very pale cool grey is actually mostly Colours Blender, I think. Okay, I am going to flick some shadows at the end of this arch just to increase that feeling of volume there. So how are we looking? It's very subtle on the screen, isn't it? Let me try. Don't know if that helps. Possibly. But it is very subtle. Okay. Let's go to the next bit at the top. There's these areas here, these Zentangle terms, they're mukas. Oh, I've got these ones to do here as well. These frondy things. I do know that those frondy things, as I've just called them, are things that you find in Zentangle, but I can't remember the name of them, and I haven't looked it up. They're the things I like to use. So for these, I'm putting dark shadows to the bottom and the left of the spirals and just blending it out, and I'm leaving the top part with no shading in, just leaving it plain white. I am going to get some shadow going on there. I'm going to try and sneak a bit of shadow in just over that there, and then just perhaps blend that out. So we've got some variation going on. So that's looking okay. The flowers, I'm going to make quite a broad kind of shadow. I'm going to leave an area of white for the highlight, but I'm going to fill the rest of this area with the lightest grey. I just drew around a circle for a highlight in the centre of the flower, and the rest is that I've used this darker grey to intensify the shadow just along the edge. And if it fades out like it's done here, I can just go back and add just that hint more, just to darken it up, and that gives a nice kind of domed shadow. So I'll do that with all of these. So there's my shadow. I'm going to go around it with these. So I'm just doing the centres of these flowers now. I'll do the same here. Bearing in mind I'll have a lot more shadow where these overlap. So I want to make sure I go around these areas that are overlapped and just echo those shapes that are there. Again, if the edge is a bit too... You do get edges sometimes that are a bit too solid. Then just go back with the paler colour or a colourless blender and just help to blend that in and smooth those edges out. It's never going to be perfectly perfect. It's not like using something like watercolour, but it'll be good enough. Now around the edge here, I do want to pop some shadow around the flower centre on the petals. That'll help lift that dome up just that little bit. And I need to look at where we've got overlapping petals and just make sure that I go around those with shadows as well. The same on this leaf. Even though I haven't put any shadow on the leaf, I'm going to pop these shadows in now. And here I also need to pop a shadow in there and there. Just do that while I'm at it. And I am just going to go around this with paler grey just to blend this out that little bit. And I might just flick a bit of the paler grey right on the tips of the petals, because that will make it look like the petals are bending downwards, up and down. So they've got a little curl in them almost. Just a little bit. So we've got that. Okay. Now for this leaf, I am going to put shadow right around the edge of the leaf. First in the lighter colour, and I'm also going to add shadow where the petals overlap. Checking I'm still on camera because I'm moving my paper around here to make it easier for me to draw. I'm just going to spread that out a little bit, and I'm going to leave what is light there. So already I can see the difference between this area and these, which is, I'm quite pleased with this as it's turning out. So I think I'll use the same idea for these as I did for the centres of the daisies, in that I'm going to pop some shadow all the way around the edge and leave a highlighted area somewhere. I'll come back and deal with these inner pieces, I think, at a later point. I did put some shadow across because I am drawing shadow where these overlap, like here. Then I am going to go and just blend that darker colour out just a little bit. I've actually spilled it over into that area, but I'm fine with that at the moment. Okay, let me have a look. So I'll put the darker one on first here. So there's going to be quite a lot of shadow on this one because it's underneath. This curving area, as is this. So okay, I'm just going to pop in darker shadow there. I faded that one out a bit too much there. And we'll do the same with this one. Can be a lot of shadow on this one as well, but I'm going to try and keep an area nice and light and bright as well. I think this is where I may need that darker grey to really help. Okay, so we're going back to these little archy shapes because I've got more of them here. So I'm just going to simply add shadow at each end of them. Got some more here, and I've even got more here, so while I'm at it I may as well do them all. The longer they are, the wider I can make that shadow, and I want to make it that little bit darker where they overlap as well. So I think I'll be coming back with that darker grey in a moment, just to add some extra shadow right into the nooks and crannies. Let me just keep on working with just these two for a moment, so they'll give me that guide. So I'm going to put dark shadow here where this one overlaps everything underneath it, and I will use this then just on the outside edge of it, just to help it spread outwards and to blend that edge. Here is interesting because I've got this going on here where it meets here, but we've got a section that goes under. It's an interesting pattern, this one, and you do have to, I think, key to working with this one is to work kind of logically. So I do want to add some shadow around this darker area, like so. Alright, and I want to add darker shadow on the bottom and the left again. There's some that needs to go there and here. I'm looking at where things start to overlap. As well. So here I've got a bunch of lines that is going underneath this dark circle. So I'm adding shadow there. There'll be shadow here as well. Perhaps some there, and perhaps I'll pop some along the edge because I think that will be quite nice. Let me have a look. I may live to regret that, but I can always fade it back with the colourless blender. So I am going to pop some shadows along the edge because I just think that they would just helps to add that feeling that this is above them, and need a shadow there. These go underneath, so I need that darker shadow there. And I did put a dark shadow here, but it's faded back so much I'm going to have to use that darker grey, I think. Let me have a look here. So again, we've got that bunch of lines there that is fading underneath this, and I'm going to just bring some lines out here. So we've got some there. Fine, and some of the darker grey there. This needs a bit of a blend. And that one does now. So that's brought some dimension into that. It's quite surprising how, as subtle as the grey is, it still brings that feeling of dimension here. Okay, right, I'm going around here to add shadow from this falling on everything below it. And the wider I make the shadow, the higher up this will appear. It's the other thing. And I do need to blend the edge of this shadow, which is the lovely thing about using the lighter marker, because it will do that for me. And that really does lift that up, and it also sends this leaf backwards into the shadows as well. So it makes it feel like we've got a lot of space under there. This is what I'm going to do here, is I really am going to just add some shadows to the tip edges of the leaves. And underneath there, and I'm just going to blend it out. I try to leave some white highlights, but I may not manage that, but that's what the white or the colourless blender is. It's not white. Yeah, gosh. There we go. So I'm just using the colourless blender here just to get some of that colour out of the way there. Okie dokes. Alright then, I'm going to start adding shadows around these, where they overlap both each other and the area of the leaf as well. Underneath that leaf I'm going to add a fair amount of shadow. And I know I'm going to need that darker grey, I think. So we just start here. Just start to blend some of this out. Miss that one. There. That'll be fine. Just add some lighter shadow to the bottoms and lefts area of that inside. Just lift that up. Okay, these little beads here, that some of them are overlapping the layers and some aren't. So where there's an overlap like this, I'm adding shadow. Just use my lighter grey just to blend that out. And here there'll be some extra shadow. I'm just going to pop some into the bottom of these shapes, just to add that feeling of shadowing going on, shape, volume. I'm just adding that little touch of lighter grey just to help that blend out. So we've got that. Now then, these shapes here are interesting because they alternate where there's space in between, that where there is nothing, literally nothing. So I'm going to leave that in between space white to emphasize that. I have popped, oh god, ugh. I have to put these down to open this, get a decent grip on this one. But I'm going to use some colourless blender here just to give me that highlight. Okay, these ones again. So if I look here where this circle is, I can see there are some lines that come out there, 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 there. I've got an overlap here, so I'm going to overlap there. There's an overlap here, and there's a big one under that ledge. There's an overlap here as well, and one there. So we're going to do that. There's an overlap here, but I'm also going to add shadow to the bottom. There's an overlap here, and overlapping lines there, and I need to do the shadow around there. And then I'm just going to use this lighter grey just to help to blend them, give a better kind of gradient grey shadow. I will add that there. Got somebody banging outside at the moment. It's okay. All right, and I'm nearly done. I've just got this section to do here, and this one's going to be easy because I am going to pop some grey there. I'm going to pop some there because that is going to shadow over, and I'm also going to pop some shadow right around the edges just to make it feel like perhaps we've got a bit of a doming going on here. And I shall leave that at that. Let me pop these away for a moment, because I'm going to get that darker grey, because I know there are places where I want just a little bit more of a deeper shadow, and hopefully I'll get that in with this. Very light hand required. Kid you not. So I'm just adding where the shadows would be darkest. And although this looks quite dark now, as you can see has happened with these lighter greys, they do fade back as they dry. So I'm going to just pop that there. I'm not going to use this everywhere, just in carefully chosen places, I think. Otherwise, everything will end up looking very much the same. I'm going to use it where there's a distinct overlap, or where I want that overlapping to really lift up. And under here is one of those places I want to really get that sense of this being lifted above that leaf. I really am going to go and like that. This here, perhaps a little bit. So these need a bit more depth of those shadows. Like so. I'm going to darken the shadows where these sit above a layer, as I will with those. This one is sitting above these here. So again, I'm going to add shadow where things overlap quite a bit, just to enhance that. Though I may end up with a bit of a line with these, I'm going to let it be as it is, rather than fussing too much, because I'll end up spreading this ink perhaps a bit further than I would like it spread. So just fill in these sections over here with the darker ink, just to lift these stems or fronds up. And I think I may just go round this there. Okay, so that is looking okay. I think the other area I might add the darker grey to is just along the edge here. I really could do with some fine line marker pens. Not water-soluble ones, alcohol markers like this. I really, really could do with some. Why they're not made, I don't know. It's beyond me. Manufacturers, you need to get a grip. Not that they're going to listen to me, a mere. Not very good with markers or colours of any kind, but the one thing I do want to do is these, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a fair amount of the mid-tone in these. I'm not going to fill it all the way with the mid-tone grey unless we've already got a shadow there, because I think I'd rather like these to look like they're hollow. So that means I need a fair amount of contrast, and it's at the top here. I want to use this darker colour grey. I put the middle shade of grey in there because that will dampen the paper with the alcohol, and I'll be able to hopefully go back now and just blend this out a little. That's the plan, by using the medium shade, and then come back with the, I don't need any more of the darker shade, I don't think. Oh gosh, so throw the darker shade onto my paper and my drawing board. First mark on my drawing board. It's a new drawing board. I'm toying with the idea of using some fresco paints to paint it, but I'm really rubbish at things like that. So here I'm using the light, I'm using the colourless blender. I wanted to use the lighter shade of grey just to blend these down. Go back and use the grey, because I actually do want this to feel like it's shadowy rather than much in the way of a highlight. And so I'm going to go back with the darker colour just to intensify the shadows right at the very top. I'm a bit heavy-handed. There we go, and then the middle one is this one. Today it's really nice because I don't have so many alcohol markers on my desk as I've had in the past few videos. Not the last one, 3 before that. And I think that is mostly done, but what I am going to do is I'm going to use the lightest grey to add a drop shadow. So here what I'm doing is I'm drawing a grey line around the shape to the left and the bottom. So I've got the left there, and bearing in mind I've got some bits that are hanging out like this, so I'm going to put the shadow to the left and the bottom of those as well. So it's not all the way along this, but it is like that. And there would be a drop shadow over here, and I need to make sure I get my drop shadows in on that. There's nothing else hanging over the edge. Well, yeah, there's this one that would have a shadow there. This one would have a bit of a shadow as well. That one I've already dealt with. Does this show up? Move it down a bit. Does it show up? Not very much. So medium grey, and I'm going to do this as a smaller shadow right up next to the line. So I'm not going to put quite as much of this on as I did for the other one, hopefully. But it's not going to be perfectly perfect. I know people can do things by hand that are perfectly perfect, and I admire them for doing it, but beginning to understand that may not be my style, my way of doing things. And I think if I can embrace how I do things here and now, my own way of things, then perhaps I'll be more comfortable. Okay, let me zoom out again. And I think that is this done. Okay, let me just have a look at the exposure and see if decreasing the exposure again will allow us to see the shadows a bit more. Possibly. It's very subtle, but it's there. And I think if I was to go back to where I started, we'd see that kind of difference. I haven't got the skills to be able to drop a comparison picture in this frame or anything. But I think there is a distinct difference. Perhaps the best way to have a look at that will be to see these, and in comparison, even how very subtle shadows make a difference. How the shadows have brought the layers out in this one compared to any of these that you can see. If I squidge this over a bit, we'll see a few more. I think so. So that was a bit of fun. So I hope that helped you, Mr. Chen, Mr. Keith Chen Keith, and showed how I sort of approach these kinds of things. I'm always scared of putting too much grey down because it always looks like there's just too much contrast. But then when I go back and add colour, I may end up going back and intensifying those. That's if I add colour. I quite like monochrome, but and I'm still learning how to add shadow that suits me. Highlights. Oh, I've forgotten about highlights, haven't I? Where's my pencil case? It's here. It's in my pencil case. I know I have a white jelly roll. One of my many pencil cases. I kid you not. The amount of pens I have and the different kinds of pens that I love to use at different times for different purposes or on a whim. It's ridiculous. Okay, so I am going to add white gel pen to these dots. I'd normally wait until I've added colour because I know the gel pen can be coloured by alcohol markers, but it doesn't move the gel pen, so I can just go over the top of the gel pen again if I need to. But as long as I'm careful with gel pen or with the alcohol markers, I should be able to just go back over and add it in if I've made a right mess of this. So I am adding white dots into things where I can, where I think it will make a nice difference. It always feels nice, it's that contrast again. So I'm just going to put some dots in those little black bits here, this area. I'm not going to do anything there because I'm likely to add colour here. That's if I decide what I'm going to do. But where I can add them, Added some white there. Where they're unlikely to be affected by any colour I add, then I've done that just to add that whiteness in. Ooh. These ones too need a spot of white, and that one there. It helps to break those big areas of black up, but it also adds that interest to those beads in the middle of the swerve, the foundation of each swerve pattern. They grow from those beads really. So thank you for joining me. I hope this makes sense. I hope it gives you some ideas of thinking, how to think about shadows. I always think to the left and bottom of shapes, and then where they overlap. And where they overlap, you can have the shadow going above, below, whatever. There'll be a bigger shadow cast below if you've got the light source from up here. So you'd have a bigger shadow. The light's coming from this direction, this finger here, the one I'm wiggling. Then the greatest amount of shadow will be over here on this daisy, but there'd also be a little bit of shadow around the edge there. I like to think so. In reality, it's how it looks that matters rather than the logic, because this doesn't exist. You know, in reality, it could do if I could sculpt or 3D model or whatever, or 3D print, you know, then that would be different if I could use clay. I'm a nightmare with it. A 3D pen, yeah, it's possible. That would be fun to use to do something like this, but perhaps not. Because as soon as I start thinking about it, I'm going, oh, it's bad enough working in layers with digital art and doing something like that. Anyway, I'm wittering. As long as it looks like it makes sense, because it's not something that is real, like a person or an apple or a mug of tea or coffee. It's a design, and we can put shadow in to enhance the layers. And logic helps with adding it. But really, it becomes part of the pattern if you approach it in the same kind of way, and it works. So with that, I'll say thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It is free. I'm not charging you for subscriptions at all. Perfectly happy. It'd be lovely if you do, and you can join in the community section, which I'm trying to get my head around. I'm not very good at social media at all. I'm an introvert, and I'm not very good at things like this, and promoting myself and engaging with people. It's not a skill I have, but it'd be lovely to learn how to, so you could help me with that. Enjoy your weekend. Tomorrow's Sunday. If you're watching this Saturday, so I don't release videos on a Sunday. I take a break from videoing, but I don't take a break from art, and I often do post on my social media whatever I'm drawing at the time. So until I see you again, look after yourselves and find time to be creative. Bye-bye for now.